Hello and welcome to Homeschool MBA, where we talk about different lectures on business management. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. So the agenda today is talk about supply chain management. We've created a one-page slide which talks about most of the key parameters that come into place when we talk about supply chain. Hello, Professor. How are you doing? Let's give the audience an overview of supply chain management and then dig into all these key parameters.
I'm okay. Thank you very much. Calling again. Supply chain management, the buzzword is SCM. It's like works like blood veins in the body. Exactly the same way, if the supply chain is working, the organizations can achieve their objectives very comfortably. The definition, of course, is given in the slide, but let me make it very clear right at the outset that this explanation or this small talk would benefit two types of people. One, those who do not understand the supply chain and they want to understand that what is supply chain management. And the other, those who are already involved in it and they are facing problems here and there because of certain difficulties in integrating or in understanding the role of different factors involved in supply chain. So these two beneficiaries will definitely appreciate this effort of yours. So what we can do is you have very rightly put it into 8 different factors. So let's say SCM works like a blood veins in the body. Supply chain management has been defined as the design, planning, execution, control, and monitoring of supply chain activities with the objective of creating net value, building a competitive infrastructure, leveraging worldwide logistics, synchronizing supply with demand, and meeting performance globally. Now, it's a good definition, but you see, no definition is permanent. It keeps changing with the change in the time. Like, for example, today's supply chain has different factors than it had, say, about 10 years back. Now, the COVID-19 epidemic has very seriously affected the supply chain management, and the outcome is very dangerous. As a matter of fact, certain economies are going down, and sales of certain things is going down. Prices are going up, and people are not getting what they want. So therefore, we would say that the most seriously affected factor or the sector by COVID is the supply chain management. So this is the time that it has to be integrated. And we have to make sure that all these 8 factors are very seriously taken, and only then we can counter or face the challenge. Now, the most important, of course, is the ecosystem. Ecosystem like, a natural ecosystem, that there are mountains and there are rivers and there are seas and there is land and there are, plants and there are, different species. There, they all put together, they make the world or the universe. Now, exactly the universe of a corporate sector has also got ecosystem. Now that is basically, if we just boil it down to a few words, that is network of vendors, suppliers, dealers, agents, and consultants, which can be divided into interconnected, interrelated, or interlinked networks, channels, and nodes. For example, we can take an example of a university. University is not just simply the four walls of the building and a nice building, air conditioned or centrally heated and well furnished. No, it is comprises of three major factors: hardware factor and the software factor. The hardware factor, of course, is the building and this, that, and the other. Software factor is the systems that they are running and the teaching methodology that they are. And there is a third factor, that there are teachers and students. Now, where do we get the students at university level? Now, the ecosystem of university level comprises of schools, colleges, starting right from the lower level, and then even the bookshops and the printers, the photocopiers, and things like that. They all put together, they make the university, work. So that's what a small example of ecosystem can be referred as. So, so we have to make sure that supply chain management is integrated with the network. That is, you know, cost and profit analysis, and then contracts and agreements and long-term, short-term agreements, risk mitigation, disaster crisis management, and supply chain resilience. Now, these are basically those factors where while you are managing the supply chain, you have to take into account. Like, for example, we're saying cost and profit analysis. That, of course, we'll take later on at your point number 4 when we say why buy if you can rent it. So, but the cost factor definitely plays a very important role. And then risk mitigation and disaster crisis management, you have to be well prepared, and you have to foresee. And the companies and they have to be proactive rather than reactive. They should foresee that what is going to happen and how will they control that situation if it occurs. So that would save us a lot of risk. And then supply chain resilience is also sticking to what you have planned and what you want to achieve, and those weaknesses and strengths and all that. So all that you have to keep in mind. Now there are two very important factors which you must understand, that this SCM integration means there are two types of SCM approaches: upstream approach and downstream approach. Now, in upstream approach, that is inventory management, a retail outlet, and management. Now, let's say, what does it, excuse me, what does it actually mean? Let's say you are a manufacturer and you are supplying your products to retailers or to your clients. So the most important thing for you would be to maintain inventory, that so that you have sufficient inventory with you, so that you can supply the product as and when required. And then to do that, you have to select the outlets, that where do you want to send. And outlet would mean the retailers. And then the next would be that how would you really deliver those things. And when we come down to delivery part, now that would be downstream approach. So that means that how to make sure that your products are delivered to the outlets and to the retailers and then to the customers. Now, again, the inventory management approach will come over here as well. And now another factor comes in, that is design, production, technology, and cost. That what do your customers want, what kind of design they like. So every time if you look at the example of a mobile phone, you would appreciate that the design and the style of the phone and with is changed almost every year with adding new features in it, or even the shape and, things like that. So if you do that, that would directly affect your production cost. And when the production we are talking, then we have to talk of the technology. Technology would mean automation. And when we say in automation, then naturally your the staff and the manpower that would be involved in automation would have to be trained, and that would add to your cost. So the cost factor will also be very, very important to consider. Then also that would be, it will include cycle time, capacity, factory capability, and efficient routes, etc. So that means that here, when we are talking of using technology, automation, and we are also considering cost, and then we are talking of when, where, and how. Then we also take at the, looking at the capacity and the factory capability. No, no, we started with this after effects of COVID. Now, imagine that you have a factory, but here you are working only with 50% staff. So imagine that the production will go down by 50%. And if your production goes down by 50%, then remember that how would the customers be satisfied? So that is the reason the world is now facing high prices and inflation and shortage of goods, especially, let's say, to be specific, vaccine and those antibiotics and all that, because you see the capacity of the factories and the production capacity is not being used to the full, not because of any fault on the part of the management of the factory, but because of the COVID after effects. Now, that is what the world has now seriously realized, that, two things that have come out with this COVID-19. One is that supply chain management problem, and the other is the capacity, how to make sure that the production is, at full capacity. Anyway, we are getting in too many details. Then we moved out to step 3, that is evolution of SCM. Basically, it started with ERP system, that is enterprise resource planning system. That is that, how do you really produce, plan, and things like that. ERP is a very good software which gives you very good results. Like, to be, let's say, to give you an example, that in a company which is a very large company, ERP system would help you transfer people from one place to the other automatically, and they would predict how many people are retiring, and how many people are due for promotions and things like that. So that was the first step. And then globalization, it ended into globalization, joint ventures, and strategic alliances. Now, that also would mean, you see, there are different ways, or the philosophies of production for local market, production for international market, and production for, let's say, for the globe. Now, here the economies of scales come in. Now, if you are producing for the entire market of the world, naturally the cost of production will go down and your profit margin would be increased. If the same thing or the same product is produced only for your national use, the cost will go up. Now, when we are talking of globalization, then we get into strategic alliances, and these are the partnerships and the joint ventures. And these days you feel that and you witness that most of the companies are having joint ventures, that is outsourcing and things like that. That is part of this globalization, and using the best talent any available anywhere in the world, which ultimately these days we are calling digitalization of the economy or digitalization of production. So that it means is digitalization means using the talent from all over the world to produce the best one, because it is no more bound to only, producing in only in one country. The design can be made in and one country, then the production can be in another country, and yet control can be from another country. So people can, with 5G approach, they can sit in different parts of the world and produce, design, and control the same product. So that also then leads us to specialization. That is that, we have subject specialists and, things like that. The supply chain can and services and warehouses, etc. So here again, this is supply chain is creating a very, very strange type of approach that you will see that in near future, all these big buildings will go out of sight, where those, 8-story buildings selling, retail goods and things like that. To give you an example, that if you wanted to buy a shirt, so you had to go to a big store in the United States of America. There may be 7, 8 floors, and then you'll have to go through and see various types of shirts and all that. Now, the same thing is available on the website, that you select a shirt, place an order, so they'll make it and deliver it to you. So that big building is not required, because if that thing was sold like previously it was done in those big buildings, so the cost of the building, cost of maintenance and security cost and the sales cost and things like that would be added to the products, and the price of the product will definitely go very high. And here the orders are confirmed when you place an order on the website. So that means that it's a confirmed order. So they just make it and send it to you. And when they send it to you, the supply chain comes in. So the supply chain again here would mean an important factor in delivering the services and the goods to the clients. And then we come down to point 4, that why buy if you can rent it. Now, here is a good example: purchasing chip or material from third party, or producing built in yourself. Now, you want to make a mobile phone, or you want to make a laptop, or you want to make some digital gadget. So there are two ways: that you buy a chip from the market, or you make yourself. And here the cost will come in, and the economies of scales will come in over here. So the buzzword would be, why buy if you can rent it? So that means that if you can rent, or if you can purchase, if the renting is more economical, so you would like to rent rather than producing it or purchasing it. Then in supply chain, basically whatever the production systems are, they depend on raw material. And when we talk of raw material, like microchips and all that, they also make part of raw material. So we have procurement systems in every country, every organization, every corporate world has its own procurement procedures and systems and SOPs. So there are two types of procurements, that is hardware and software. So both have different, methods and methodologies to procure, because you have to go for the government policies or the organizational policy, how to procure hardware, to make sure that level field is provided to the vendors and the sellers and things like that. And that goes as well for the software procurement. Then is the production itself. So it involves producers, technology, manpower, permanent or hourly or control capacity. So the production basically depends on the producing companies, those who are manufacturers, those who want to produce, and they are the people who would definitely like the supply chain to be managed well, because if they do not get the input in the factory or in their company, they will not be able to produce. So therefore they have to use technology for production as well. As we discussed earlier, in technology, ERP system will come in where it would monitor your inventory and would inform you well in time that which particular item is running short and things. They have the critical levels. The ERP manages and supervises that level, and once you reach that level in that inventory, so you reorder and you things like that. Another factor over here is that no matter how much automation or technology you may use, the man behind the machine is still very important, because no machine can replace man. Manpower is very much required, but this manpower which we require working in technology and in automation is a specialized manpower. Those people who are well educated, who are very well trained, and those who understand the technology, and those who know how to manage change. So there are two approaches, that permanent or hourly contracts. So you can have a team of permanent subject specialists, those who are supervising the entire production process, are designing and controlling the quality, like TQM and all that. Or some manpower can be hired on contract or on hourly basis. So that would also lead us to that what capacity do we want to maintain, and all these manpower would depend on the capacity, that how much people do we need to use the full capacity of our production. So then another factor comes in, because you are producing in the factory and then you have to deliver it to the customers. So that will have to be to go through excise and taxation. Every government has its own import policies and export policies, which involves you know taxation, excise, sales tax, and general sales tax, etc. So those people who are managing the supply chain, they need to be aware of excise and taxation policies of their client countries or the organizations. And then lastly, but not leastly, transportation. Now, when we say transportation, it has different factors within it. If it's a local delivery, it's not a big problem. Even at national level, you can hire the local, transport, and, various services are available these days, like DHL and TCS and, things like that. And same can be said about international also and global also. And but when we get into international or global sector, then we have air routes, and we have road routes, and we have sea routes. Now here the problem also starts. Now geopolitical situation of the world is now changing, and we are witnessing that these air routes and sea routes and even road routes are being politicized, because the big markets, the world is converted into a few big markets, like European market, American market, Indian market, and Chinese market, and Asian market, and things like that. Here, these routes and policies, they are very important. So, in other words, transportation is actually the major vein of supply chain, and here we have to make sure that the proper routes are selected and a very serious attention is paid to this if we want to keep the supply chain working. I think that is how this whole scenario would work. If you have any questions, I can answer that.
Professor, one question I want to ask about risk mitigation or supply chain resilience crisis management. When should we consider having multiple sources of supply for a particular product?
It is basically right at the beginning, because they say that never put eggs in the same basket. But some people say we put it in the same basket and we take care of it. But that's a different approach. I think that right at the time of your initial agreements, you should have not one vendor, you should have more than 2 or 3 vendors with whom you can have contracts and agreements for supply of the same raw material or same material, so that if particular vendor is not able to supply you, you have the chance to get into the other. So it's in the initial stages that you should have options available to you, and you should have more than a couple of vendors or contractors or suppliers signed with you.
Okay, and my second question is, based on the COVID experience, how should one consider pricing and long-term pricing agreements, either for products or for transportation?
Prices, naturally, they depend on supply and demand. So it's a very difficult question to answer, because if the demand is more, naturally the prices will go high. And if demand is less, then you might have to sell with, less than the production cost. So supply and demand situation has been seriously affected by COVID. Let's say there are certain things for which the demand is too high, like vaccine. In spite of the fact that this whole world is working on this, but they are not able to meet the demand of the world for vaccine. So that means that the prices of vaccine will go high. The other side is that now that there are certain products which are no more required because of social distances and things like that now. So that has a different scenario altogether, that prices would depend basically on supply and demand situation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please like and subscribe to all our social media. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure.